My feeling in these past 15 years is that the world has changed considerably.
It's hard to believe that it's been 15 years. I mean, it seems like it was yesterday.
15 years later, 9/11 is a reflection of how strong America is.
After 9/11, we knew as a country, we knew as a people, as a nation, that we were going to be different and the world was going to be different.
What we all saw in the days and weeks and months after 9/11 was an extraordinary demonstration of compassion and generosity and volunteerism and the best of who we are as human beings.
9/11 should not be a symbol of sadness. It should be a symbol of what we can do together to help people in their greatest moment of need, no matter where that is. I think 15 years later, it's how we view that event. That is not simply looking back, but it's also looking forward.
I suppose as I think about 9/11 and the last things that I would like to leave in terms of my thoughts and strangely my hopes is that courage and fellowship and honor and integrity can come from anywhere and everywhere, and that it's inside all of us, and that we would live with that, not buried deep inside of us, waiting for some crisis or moment in history to draw it out of us, but to tap into that every day. That 9/11 should leave us as a better nation than we were before.
I do walking tours of the 9/11 Memorial for the 9/11 Tribute Center. And I meet people on my tours from all four corners of the globe. On every one of my tours, I mention that most people don't remember what they did yesterday. But I have had so many guests on my tours come up to me and say that they remember every single detail about where they were and what they were doing on September 11th, regardless of where they're from.
When you talk to anybody, say, you know, and you tell them where you were on September 11th, they'll tell you exactly where they were, because even though they may not have been in the building, but they'll definitely remember where they were.
And people always remember every single moment of that day around the world, because September 11, 2001 is not just New Yorker's story, it's not just my story, but it is international part of history and a history of every single person in the world.
And what I say to my guests all the time is, that's your 9/11 story. And you should tell it, because by telling it, by doing so, you help us to share history, and you help us to keep the spirit of what happened here alive. And I'm inspired by that. That gives me so much hope.
I believe September 11th would be the equivalent of D-Day for certain generations, or Pearl Harbor, or when JFK was assassinated, you know, those seminal, you know, markers in your history, in your lifetime.
My cousin was in Pearl Harbor. My father and grandfather remember Pearl Harbor. These generations will need to remember.
I think it's important to try to remember some tragedies. Remember that life can be very precious and can be gone in a flash.
These are emotional memories that cannot be translated into a textbook. These are stories that we tell people, and hopefully the generation will understand this here and bring it forward to the next generation.
I feel that a lot of people use September 11th to remember the wrong things, to remember the divisions instead of what brought us together. And I think as more and more time goes by, more and more people just remember the hate that caused that act instead of the love that followed it. We were all one that day. people from New York, D.C., all over the country and all over the world. Everybody was united. I think that's why everybody remembers where they were, because everybody's heart was here. I remember.
I remember.
I remember September 11th.
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 Right after 9/11 happened, I was at a memorial service for another friend who died, and there was a fireman who had just come from St. Patrick's Cathedral for a service for one of his fellow firefighters. Saw me, came over, and he said, "Mr. Brokaw, you watch my generation now. You know, we're going to become the next greatest generation."
We've had sons and daughters of firefighters who enlisted, have gone to the academies and gone and fought for the country.
They've enlisted in the military. They were called out of a sense of patriotism. I've met recently some Army Rangers who are on their 10th tour in Afghanistan. Stop and think about it. In Vietnam, you served 1 year and you came home.
I speak a lot around the country, and I run into people come up to me and say, "I enlisted, you know, because of what happened to your guys that day." And it's an emotional experience. It makes you feel proud of what your guys did.
This is for the generations who are alive. They're Pearl Harbor. This is a time they'll remember for the rest of their lives.
I think in the future, we're going to see effects on people who did not experience the event themselves, but were told about it from their parents and their teachers. We're going to see how the children in the city that day processed it differently, perhaps, than the rest of us did. Who will those children grow up to be? Will they accept that we live in a state of perpetual war now and not be sad about that?
We know that there are human beings in this world, and this has been true since time immemorial, that if they have the means and the methods to do evil, they will sometimes succeed. And we don't have full control over that. We just don't. But the one thing we do have full control over is how we respond. And we know what we're capable of, both good and bad. And I think the message is it's up to us. You know, the world that we want to leave our children and our grandchildren, it's entirely up to us.
I think 9/11 is there with the Depression, World War II, Kennedy assassination, Watergate crimes. For my generation of people, those were the memory mileposts, if you will. 9/11 is right there. There was this phrase after 9/11 of the new normal. I never liked that phrase. Insofar as I could define it, it was, well, things cannot and will not be the same. It's no good for any leader to tell us, let's go back to doing what you were doing before and the way you were before.
I don't think 9/11 ended for any of us. As a nation, I don't know that it ever will. We live in a different America.
It is now my honor to sign into law the USA Patriot Act of 2001.
Some of our freedom dissipated on that day, and that is the real historical lesson of 9/11, this sort of hyper-security state.
The new normal was that when you went to an airport, you just didn't breeze through, for one thing. You had to go through a very rigid security process. That was a part of it. If you see something, say something. Those posters were all over the country.
I remember walking into the airport LaGuardia on Thanksgiving morning in 2001, and there were soldiers with AK-47s. That was the new normal.
We were living in an environment that had changed in the country, but the resilience of Americans is that they go about their business.
I think return to normal is okay if you mean go back to work the next day. We all did that. But I think it would be abnormal not to grieve with each other. There was no way not to grieve. To say we return to normal means we wouldn't take the time to really investigate how people felt as individuals about what had happened and to honor that work.
We knew as a country, we knew as a people, as a nation, that the reverberations, the historical echoes of 9/11 were going to last for a very long time.
With the Idol 4S plus VR goggles, get the best seat in the house, even in between classes.
I'm here for the very first time. I do hope they understand, just by looking at the names and the space around the names, that they see that each name has been given a real presence.
How the names would be arranged on the parapets has been one of the most difficult issues to resolve.
The challenges with the names is, what is the function of the memorial? How much information is it supposed to convey? Do we have the floors where people work? Do we have the ages? Do we have the ranks of firefighters?
After years of controversy, they finally agreed to group people by where they were the day of the attacks. World Trade Center, Pentagon, one of the planes. But was that enough?
Something that was very important to me from the get-go was that there would be sort of a hidden logic to why one name was next to another name. And I suggested what I called the meaningful adjacencies. So there would be a meaning to why one name is adjacent to another name.
We went out to all the families in 2009 and gave them the opportunity to request if they wanted their loved one's name next to somebody else. And we had 1,200 requests, and we were able to meet all those adjacencies.
It really resonates to see him listed next to Tommy and John and all his friends.
It was comforting to see him alongside the other names of the people that he worked with, to see that John was surrounded by the gang that he worked with, you know.
My dad was one of the 23 police officers, same as Ramon Suarez. I miss him a lot. I really do. Seeing his name in the memorial, it means everything.
On September 11th, 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked. It became known as Ground Zero. After years of hard work and rebuilding, the entire site has been transformed into one of beauty and of remembrance. At its heart is the National 9/11 Memorial. Millions of visitors from all around the world come to this site to pay their respects each year. What they see are two enormous reflecting pools that sit in the very footprints of where the Twin Towers stood. The pools are surrounded by bronze panels inscribed with the names of the nearly 3,000 people who died in the attacks of 2001 and the World Trade Center bombing in 1993.
When you come to the memorial, you come up to the edge of each one of these voids, and you see this enormous empty space in front of you. It's a space that can't be filled and will not be filled. It is there where you encounter the names of the dead.
First impression you have as a visitor is how many names there are. It's a sea of names over an ocean of tears.
The Memorial Plaza, made up of hundreds of swamp white oak trees, surrounds the memorial pools. One tree is different. It is a Callery pear tree, now known as the Survivor Tree. This tree was at the site on September 11th, 2001. It was discovered in a pile of rubble by some recovery workers. It was nursed back to health and returned here. And in some sense, it really embodies the whole experience of 9/11 in a living being. It is damaged, but it also shows a tremendous amount of new growth.
And now there are no words to describe how bad it was. The massive debris field, the smell of death completely took over your whole being. To work out of that to where we are now, it was a slow, hard process.
As bad as 9/11 was, it demonstrated that when the times require, we do have the capacity to come together and take care of each other with limitless compassion.
I remember that day. I remember where I was and what I was doing. My generation, we remember growing up with it. It's like you were part of history. Makes me very proud to know that my dad went out the way for strangers. That's what I call a hero. Nobody ever wants to forget those people that passed away that day. Those people were brothers, wives, mothers, sisters, friends, and those people should be remembered in every way possible.
Every single person that comes here is making a contribution. You truly are our future. Thank you.
We're coming up on the 15-year anniversary. We're kind of closing that chapter and now moving forward.
After 15 years, it's amazing that we still went this far and we're still rebuilding here and making sure that our communities stand together, united as one.
We're back down at the Trade Center. It was one of the things that was important to me to come back, you know, to feel like a sense of closure, you know, to come back, and I just feel that it's better than it was before, you know. And just the city now, it just seems like it's all better, you know, more people, more diversity, more love. I mean, we have a lot of challenges, but it just seems that we have that notion that we can get through it.
I would say after 9/11, we were more resolved. It was this great melting pot, again, of lots of different people who looked at each other as brothers and sisters and real family and said, if you needed a hug, I'm going to give that to you. If you needed to talk, we're going to talk. If you needed somebody to hold your hand, I'm going to hold your hand.
It's a long journey for many people, 15 years, but it's not forgotten. There's so many people still affected. People suffer every day with physical and mental illnesses from what happened. I know there's people that can't come down here, they want no part of it. My younger brother was a first responder. His lungs were damaged, but he can't bring himself. It's too painful to come back. The future after 9/11 is going to be a trying time, but as long as people trust and they come together, I think it can make a big difference to keep the evil out of this world.
I think moving forward, we're talking about another generation. So now we have the museum built, the memorial here, and you have people that were born after September 11th who know nothing about it. I think going forward, it's actually more difficult than the rebuilding is how to capture what happened on September 11th, how to educate about September 11th in a way that's not using fear, that's using education and using compassion. And I think that's difficult because people tend to forget the past. So I think our main mission now is to make people remember September 11th and talk about just giving back and going forward.